Okay, hold on. Gotta make sure I got the right type. Five. Let me double check that really fast. Yeah, it looks like I'm good. Wonder if I had to maybe re-record. Okie doke, folks. So I am back with episode 5. I'm about to go live on TikTok. Okay. Here we go. Should be able to hear me loud and clear. That's my hoping. Camera is working today, so we are off. Believe it's possible. The number one problem that keeps people from winning in the United States today, lack of belief in themselves. Arthur L. Williams, founder of A.L. Williams Insurance Company, sold to Primerica for $90 million. Napoleon Hill, the author of Think and Grow Rich, once said, "Whatever the mind can conceive, believe it can achieve." In fact, the mind is such a powerful instrument. It can deliver to you literally everything you want. But you first have to believe that what you want is possible. Belief is a choice. Simply a thought you choose to think over and over until it becomes automatic. You get what you expect. Scientists used to believe that humans responded to information flowing to the brain from the outside world. But today they're learning instead that we respond to what the brain, the basis of previous experience, expects to happen next. Researchers at Baylor College of Medicine, for example, recently studied the outcome of arthroscopic knee surgery on patients with painful worn-out knees who were given one of two types of arthroscopic surgery, either scraping out the knee joint or washing it out. The result The results were then compared to patients who unknowingly received a pretend surgery where doctors made tiny incisions in the knee as if to insert their surgical instrument, then did nothing. Years later, patients who underwent the pretend surgery reported equal improvement in pain relief and knee function as patients who had received an actual surgery. The brain expected the imaginary surgery to improve the knee, and it did. This is known as the placebo effect. Why does the brain work this way? Neuropsychologists who study expectancy theory say it's because we spend our whole lives becoming conditioned. For a lifetime's worth of events, our brain actually learns what to expect next, whether it eventually happens that way or not. And because our brain expects something will happen a certain way, we often achieve exactly what we anticipate. This is why it's so important to hold positive expectations in your mind. When you replace your old negative expectations with more positive ones, and you begin to believe that what you want is possible, your brain will actually take over the job of accomplishing the possibility for you. Better than that, your brain will actually expect to achieve that outcome. Book Self Help, bestseller, Visualize Success. I can't see that working for me. A couple of bums who be anything you want to be. Only you believe with sufficient conviction, act in accordance with your faith. Whatever the mind can achieve. Napoleon Hill, best-selling author of Think and Grow Rich. Philadelphia Phillies pitcher Tug McGraw, father of legendary country singer Tim McGraw, struck out batter Willie Wilson to earn the Phillies the 1980 World Series title, Sports Illustrated captured an immortal image of elation on the pitcher's mound. Image few people knew was played out exactly as McGraw had planned it. Seeing a page here. When I had the opportunity to meet Tug one afternoon in New York, I asked him about his experience on the mound that day. It was as if I'd been there 1,000 times before, he said. When I was growing up, I would pitch to my father in the backyard. We would always get to where it was the bottom of the ninth in the World Series, with 2 outs and 3 men on base. I would always bear down and strike them out, because Tug had conditioned his brain day after day in the backyard. They eventually arrived where he was living that dream for real. McGraw's reputation as a positive thinker had begun 7 years earlier during the New York Mets' 1973 National League Championship season, when Tug coined the phrase, "Gotta believe," during one of the team's meetings. That Mets team, in last place in the division in August, went on to win the National League pennant, reach Game 7 of the World Series, where they finally succumbed to the Oakland A's. Another example of his always optimistic "you gotta believe" attitude was the time, while he was a spokesman for the Little League, that he said, "It should practice autographing baseballs. This is a skill that's often overlooked in Little League." And then he smiled his infectious smile. Believe in yourself and go for it. Sooner or later, those who win are those who think they can. Richard Bach, bestselling author of Jonathan Livingston. Tim Ferriss, the author of The 4-Hour Workweek, believed in himself. In fact, he believed so strongly in his abilities, he won the National Shoe Kickboxing title just 6 weeks after being introduced to the sport. As a prior All-American and judo team captain at Princeton, Tim had always dreamed of winning a national title. He'd worked hard. He was good at his sport. Repeated injuries over multiple seasons denied him his. A friend called one day to invite Tim to watch him in the National Chinese Kickboxing Championships 6 weeks away. Tim instantly decided to join him in the competition. Tim had never been in any kind of striking competition before. He called USA Boxing and asked where the best trainers could be found. Traveled to a tough neighborhood in Trenton, New Jersey. Learned from boxing coaches who had trained gold medalists. After 4 grueling hours a day in the ring, he put in more time conditioning in the weight room. Make up for his lack of time in the sport, Tim's trainers focused on exploiting his strengths instead of making up for his weaknesses. Tim didn't want to merely compete. He wanted to win. Competition day at last arrived. Tim defeated 3 highly acclaimed opponents before making it to the finals. As he anticipated what he would have to do to win in the final match, he closed his eyes, visualized defeating his opponents in the very first round. Later, Tim told me that most people fail not because they lack the skills or aptitude to reach their goal, because they simply don't believe they can reach it. Tim believed, and he won. Believe, even when you don't know how the requirement will be met. Jason McDougall believed it was possible. As a wholesaler who was shipping goods to the historic Canadian department store chain Fields, his gut told him something was wrong at the retail giant. Wondering if the chain might be for sale, Jason cold called the head of the company and asked him to dinner, never doubting the general manager would say yes. The dinner conversation eventually turned to the question of a buyout. The general manager replied, "If ever there was a time to buy, it would be now." Followed was 90 days of frantic activity for Jason, putting the deal together and coming up with the cash. For Jason and his small company, the transaction was like a minnow swallowing a whale. Not only was the retail chain 30 times the size of Jason's business, but Jason also had no idea where the money would come from. Biggest bank loan up to that point, $5,000. Yet still he believed with utter conviction that he would eventually own Field stores. The first non-refundable deposit was due, $150,000 that Jason didn't have. His unwavering belief led him to attend a Thursday night business function where an old friend offered to give Jason the cash by Friday morning's deadline. At another stage, Jason found himself $400,000 short in making a $1 million deposit, the deadline that was just 2 hours away. Using his internal guidance and steadfast belief, Jason came up with the money minutes before the deadline passed. And just 25 days later, when another 12 million was due, Jason miraculously assembled 2 banks and 6 private investors, one of whom rushed through the paperwork in order to meet the funding deadline. At each stage of the transaction, larger and larger non-refundable deposits were due. Jason had absolute faith that the deal would happen. Had to. In fact, it was either bringing in the cash, or lose not only the deal, but also all the money he'd paid up to that point. How did Jason maintain his unwavering belief in the face of incredible odds? He followed his own guiding philosophy that if a thing is supposed to happen, it will. God had put him on this path, he said. The transaction was meant to be. Of course, the fact that each deadline was met through remarkable and serendipitous means only galvanized John's belief this deal was destined to close. Each small success along the way made him believe even more that victory was on the horizon. By the time the transaction was eventually completed 6 months later, Jason had raised tens of millions of dollars, bought an established company that was in Canada, saved hundreds of jobs, created a sizable new business for himself, all because he believed it was possible. You must find a place in yourself where nothing is impossible. Deepak Chopra, author of The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. It's not what you don't know that holds you back. What you do know that isn't true. 1983, a 61-year-old scrawny and socially awkward potato farmer named Cliff Young entered the Sydney to Melbourne Ultra Marathon, considered one of the world's most difficult physical challenges. 544 miles, or 875 kilometers, of flats and hills that would take 6 or 7 days to complete. The runners were allowed to eat and sleep as they chose. The winner would win $10,000. Cliff showed up in overalls and rain boots. The other runners, who were much younger and dressed in the latest Nike, Reebok, and made fun of him. Race officials were worried that Cliff might die of a heart attack. Cliff assured them he'd grown up on a farm where they couldn't afford horses, four-wheel drives. Now, whenever a storm was coming in, he'd often run for 2 or 3 days without sleep in order to round up his family's 2,000 sheep on their 2,000-acre ranch. The race started, all the other runners took off at high speed, leaving Cliff in the dust. Cliff, however, started with a slow loping pace, style that would later come to be known as the Cliff Young Shuffle. Now the race officials were sure Cliff would collapse and die somewhere along the route. Cliff had a secret that no one knew about, including him. Cliff had never met another long-distance runner before. He'd never talked to a coach, never read Runner's World magazine or a book on long-distance running. He therefore didn't know you're supposed to sleep for 6 or 7 hours a night during a long-distance endurance race. That first night, Cliff slept for only 2 hours. By running while the others slept, he took the lead the first night and maintained it for the remainder of the race. Next day, he ran nonstop for 23 hours, pausing to sleep for only 1 hour. Running with virtually no sleep for the entire race, Cliff crossed the finish line 10 hours ahead for the next finisher. He'd covered 544 miles in 5 days, 15 hours, and 4 minutes, equivalent of almost 4 marathons a day, shattering the previous race record by more than 2 days. Cliff's story illustrates that sometimes it isn't what you don't know that stops your success, what you do know that isn't true. It is wise to question all of your assumptions about how things are done and be open to new possibilities. Redefine what's possible, what you understand to be true. Okay, this is a shorter episode, guys, at only 15 minutes. But nonetheless, I hope you've enjoyed. And I kind of needed it after a week like this one. Like, I am just tired. I've had a very long week, very busy. I'm just very looking forward to the week. Okay, this was principle 4. Believe it's possible. The lack of belief. Lack of belief in yourself. Okay, that should do it for Principle 4. Tomorrow I'll plan to resume with Principle 5. Believe in yourself. 4, believe it's possible. 5, believe in yourself. Okay. Please remember, whether you're watching on YouTube or TikTok, to support the show. Likes, comments, shares, subscriptions, donations, Venmo Stormer Show. Anything and everything you do to support the show is very much appreciated. Keep tight, have a good night, and as always, thanks for watching.